Pink.
I'm Anissa.
And I'm Sophie Hannah, and I want to welcome you to episode 36 of Ethnically Speaking, the show where we discuss everything affecting the UK's highly melanated communities, from current affairs to pop culture and everything in between. Now, you know we always keep it 100, and on today's show, we are going to be talking about the breakup of the United Kingdom as we know it. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because former Prime Minister Gordon Brown has said that the United Kingdom could become a failed state because of existing tensions between England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland, which have been exacerbated because of the pandemic and the leaving of the EU. Now, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland has said that she vows to call another referendum on Scottish independence if her party wins the Scottish May elections. Now, if Scotland do get independence, the UK will cease to exist as we know it. And for those of us who have called ourselves British, it will no longer apply because Southerners will be known as English. Now, recent polls have suggested that there is growing support for Scottish independence and a border vote of Ireland. So this could all be happening very, very soon. What I want to know is, should the United Kingdom remain united? And what will become of us if the name English is used when that has really been a loaded term for ethnic minorities?
Do you know what, guys? I'm not really over the Brexit thing yet. This just feels a bit like too much. I'm not going to lie to you. I really have not accepted that Brexit happened. I don't mind saying that I voted to stay in the EU. And I think, judging by the mess that we made of leaving, even if we vote to separate out the United Kingdom, it's probably going to take a while to make it actually happen. We're not very good. We're kind of busy with a little thing called the pandemic right now. I don't think it's a good idea. Probably not surprising. I think I was saying on the previous episode anyway, about the way in which we kind of breed understanding, we breed tolerance and stuff, isn't by segregating ourselves even more. I think it is clear for anyone to see, if you've ever watched any of the Prime Minister's Question Time or any kind of clips on the news, watching the arguments that are going on, or you've seen the mud being slung in the media between the devolved nations, that there is a problem. There are clear divides. There is a clear lack of understanding of and representation of needs of the people in the various regions that make up the United Kingdom. So I'm not disputing that. Do I think that us just all going our separate ways is the answer to that? Certainly not. I'll come back to the second part of the question in a minute. I'm very interested to hear what Anissa says before I get on the feelings of being English.
What? Selfishly, and I say selfishly, just being honest, I wouldn't want the United Kingdom to break up because I just can only imagine the consequences that being in this part of the breakup would face for us, honestly. Like, not that I travel to Scotland and Wales and Ireland frequently, but I'm thinking, harsher border lines, and I'm thinking it's definitely going to have an effect on our economy. So selfishly, I wouldn't want the breakup because, as Marisha, you've said, we've already gone through this whole Brexit thing and it's been such a long breakup, and we're already starting to see the effects of that play out in prices of wigs. And so I can't get the wig prices can't go up again. Like, I just can't. So for me, selfishly, I don't want the breakup because of the consequences that would come on us on this side of the border. However, I will not lie, I kind of understand where the Scottish are coming from. I hate to be that person, but I do understand where they're coming from and why they would want a breakup and why it might be a little bit more advantageous to them. So yes, that's what I see. And in regards to me, English, I feel like I need to stew on that a bit more. So I'll let you have that.
I think for me, in terms of the breakup, like, I wouldn't want it because the United Kingdom is the only thing that I've ever known. But that's the only basis. Really, I think it's Scotland's decision. And I think if they want to break away, I think they're completely within their rights to do that, because the union doesn't really serve anybody apart from England. Not even Northerners, let's be very honest. Like, the way that the power is divested in the United Kingdom, it all comes south and basically to London, and politically all to Westminster. They make the decisions that affect all of the regions, and it's not fair on the regions. And when we talk about Brexit, let's be very clear. Scotland voted majority to remain. I think Wales did as well. Like, it was England that messed it up. Like, we're the ones who heavily voted and skewed what was happening in the region. And they had to be, let's say for Scotland, had to be dragged into leaving the EU when the majority of their country said that they didn't want to. And that sort of thing, not being able to make these decisions for themselves, I think really makes me understand why they want to do it. And to be fair, I think we are very... we're very limited in England to understanding what goes on in the regions, because I call myself British. Scots, Irish, Welsh don't call themselves British. If you're from Scotland, you call yourself Scottish. If you're from Wales, you call yourself Welsh. If you're from Ireland, you call yourself Irish. They don't have the same affinity to the United Kingdom as we do. They see themselves as part of it, but separate and their own entities. And when you think that a lot of the money that comes from taxes also comes... I've read that 95p of every pound of tax comes to England and Westminster, and then they decide how that gets divvied up into the regions. If Scotland breaks off, they get to keep their tax and decide what it is that they do with it. And I think the fact is, England has not been trying to divest power. They've been happy to have it. And now that Scotland want to break away, Boris wants to get up onto some form of transportation, go up there and go speak to Nicola Sturgeon, it's too late. Like, we should have been working on these relationships a long time ago.
Boris is on tour.
I mean, Bojo on tour. The thing is, listen, that is just a trademark of our government, right? Let's just look at the response to the pandemic. Everything is a little bit too little, too late, a bit too slow, not really reacting until something's a major catastrophe. So that's not that surprising. I don't think that's anything in particular to do with any kind of feeling towards Scotland, Ireland or Wales. I'm probably with both of you. I really don't want it to happen. And now that I'm listening to you reflect that to be my own sort of thoughts, it is a selfish reason. But I do stand by what I said, and that I don't think that just sort of breaking up is the answer. The same way that all the issues that we had with the EU and trying to fix them, they don't happen overnight, the issues, and they won't be solved overnight. But just sort of severing ties and thinking that we're taking back control, I think can sometimes have unintended consequences. And I think we've seen that when there was a lot of lies spun during the Brexit campaigning. We were wondering where this, whatever, 350 million for the NHS that was meant to come is in the wake of a pandemic, but that's a story for another time.
That lie made me the most angry out of the whole campaign. People who believed it, I couldn't...
That's what made me angry, Sophie, the people that believed it.
I just couldn't...
Yeah, but that's a story for another time. I think my point is, they had, I forget when it was, but they had a referendum in Scotland already under, is it Alex Salmond? And Scotland voted overwhelming majority to stay as the United Kingdom. So we already did that once. I do understand that the situation is different now that we've left the EU, and some of the things that they may have been used to and practices that we may have adopted and laws we've adopted from the EU will no longer apply, and that might change how they feel. So I think the referendum will be, if it happens, will be very interesting. I don't know that we'd necessarily expect the same outcome, but I don't know that I believe in democracy. So if that's the way the people voted, that's the way the people voted. And so I said, I didn't vote for Brexit. I'm still quite upset about it, but it is what it is. Like, the majority of the people, wherever they may be based, whether they're, the way that they voted was based on truth, based on lies, based on spin, is at this point now irrelevant. Like, that's what the vote said, unless we're going to get sort of Trump style on it and be like, oh, they're fake votes and they don't count. Like, that is the majority of the people, whether you like it or not. I think we do live in a bit of a bubble in London. We tend to think that the world revolves around us. We tend to think that the whole of the rest of the United Kingdom is like us, when that Brexit vote, I think, revealed that actually we are more in a minority. There is a lot of things that we do and powers that we have and money that gets spent that benefits us literally right here in the capital that never gets to people. We've got no idea how people are living in other parts of the country. But I stand by my point. I think we need to try to address those things. We need to give a bigger voice to the regions. We need to get on buses and on trains and go out to those places and see what is actually happening on the ground and understand the issues, and not just... Because you see, when you look at something, obviously it's much bigger, but you look at the United States, when all the candidates go off and they go polling, right, and they go and they fly to all of the states and they go and talk to all the people and stuff, it wouldn't even be that hard here, right? It's such a small country. You can be there within, in an hour or two to a lot of places, and then kind of travel further up the country. It wouldn't actually take that much to go and try to understand. And if that really failed and it really broke down, then maybe look at it. But I think it's a bit of a extreme solution. And I just want to add on the point of the what we call ourselves and how we refer to ourselves. I use them interchangeably. So I've never really thought about it. So I will refer to myself as British, I'll refer to myself as English, and kind of think of them as one and the same thing. So it's quite interesting to think about the fact that the Scottish, the Irish, the Welsh be very pointedly not refer to themselves as British.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I actually don't refer to myself as English at all. Like, I just refer to myself as British. But if I wanted to speak about a white person in London, I'd call them English. My mum would be like, oh, he was an Englishman. And so that's kind of how I've always seen the term. So it's been quite complex in my mind. But I think you brought up a very interesting point, Marisha, about all the places outside of London. And I think we're in a bit of a complex place where London almost operates as its own mini little country within England, and then all the other cities are kind of left to fend for themselves. And I think we are starting to see that, especially in a lot of the polls and obviously how Brexit voted, etc., etc. I was on YouGov and they did a survey, and this was the whole idea: if Britain was to break up, like, how would you view yourself, British, English, blah blah blah. And the majority vote was that people saw themselves equally as British as they did English, right? So that was the 38%. All the other votes were like 19.8, blah blah blah. But what was interesting, they found, was that the cities outside of London tended to vote towards that. They felt like they were more English, that they referred to themselves as English, where people in London were more likely to tend to vote to see themselves as British. And I think that has a little bit to do with this whole idea of power. Like, obviously, the UK is run by, Little Westminster, and that's in London. So we see ourselves as British versus, so we see the benefit, if we're even thinking about like TfL, where children under 18, well, it's on the line now, but used to get free travel to school. But when I was going to university in Coventry, all the children under 18, they didn't have free travel to school. The buses weren't even TfL. It was a private company. It was National Express, and they had to actually pay to get on the bus. But I was like, but this is one of the poorest cities of England. Shouldn't they get free travel? Like, I was always asking questions to my lecturers, like, where is the government down here? Is no one doing anything? Because I was like, it is bad down here. Where is the government? And it's this whole idea of, I guess we're so concentrated into London that it's easy for us to have an idea of British, because the idea of the British Empire and being united, like, that's the strength, and so that's where the power is. So, oh yeah, we're British, but if you don't feel like you benefit from that, you will then separate yourself. So, for example, Scottish, Irish, Welsh, and that's maybe why the other cities outside of London see themselves as English, which is, yeah. So I've lost my train of thought, but that's why I'll park this train.
I definitely. So I definitely agree with you, Anissa, in the sense that in London we have a very skewed understanding of what's going on in the rest of the country. And that's why I'm all for Scotland voting for independence if they want it. It's not what I want, but I do feel like they should be able to make that decision, because I am someone who called myself like a hardcore Londoner who moved out of London a few years ago to another city further up in the country. And the way that they look at London is not favourable. And I was surprised. I was just like, I thought everyone wanted to be a Londoner. I thought everyone wanted to live in the city. And they were just like, no one wants to be there. Like, it's nice to go for a day, but not to live there. And I was really confused, because as a Londoner, my whole identity was surrounded by being part of this multicultural city. And you see that multiculturalism kind of fade, maybe the higher up that it is that you get. But when you were saying, we need to get on the trains and the buses and go up there and see the Northerners, and that's what Boris needs to do, and the government, let's just see if we can even get up there, because talking about transport outside of London is no joke. Like, they're talking about, they haven't even built up the train systems further up north you go. It's so difficult to get to. There are some trains like in Liverpool that are literally a bus that has been put onto train tracks, and they now call like a train. Like, And when money comes into the country for buildings and for transport, it gets kept in the south and predominantly in London. So we don't really have an understanding of what's going on. I've read somewhere that they said that the mortality rate, life expectancy is going up in the United Kingdom, but they're like only in the south. In the north, it's actually gone down. They're like in the south, I think it was in Richmond, like the average age of life is 71.5 years. And like in parts of the north, the average is 50 something. And I was just like, that's insane. Like, and they were saying some countries have poor parts, but they would say, England has a poor half. Like northerners don't get the same sort of deal that we get in the south. And I think if that's happening in the north, let alone what's going on in various parts of different regions or whatever, and for them to now say, actually, we don't want you to be taking all the money, taking all the power, making decisions on our behalf, because it's not that they've been doing this since the pandemic and Brexit. It's been going on for centuries. So, and I don't think, to be fair, that England, Westminster, London, let's be honest, has an incentive to do anything about the union unless people threaten to leave. So let's see if this can broker a better deal. But I think Boris is going up there for puppy show, if I'm being honest, because if Scotland didn't want to vote out at this election, he wouldn't even be up there. He wouldn't be there because they're like, whatever. But once the power and the money could be taken away from England, then we might not get as much. Suddenly they care. If it wasn't going to affect us whatsoever in the south in terms of the economy, I don't even think that the Conservatives would even care enough.
Yeah. You might be right. I mean, I'll be honest as well. I bloody love Nicola Sturgeon. Anytime I watch her in the debates, anytime she talks, I'm like, yes, she's such a brilliant politician. Like, actually, what I would love to happen is, can we just vote for her to just take over the running of the United Kingdom? Because I got a lot of time for that. And they have brought in some amazing things, which I think we could learn from, like free university education. Like, how about we bring that everywhere else? Like, London isn't the centre of the universe. And you're right, it's a very London. I didn't even think about that. There's the British, there's the English, and then there's the Londoner in me. It's a very, very strong kind of identity. I think that could be helped, not just by the politicians, but by the people going. So it's not a joke, because actually it's bred a lot of problems, but I make jokes all the time. There's always this stat that's thrown around about the percentage of Americans that actually own a passport, and because they get such little vacation, they barely travelled out of state to anywhere else in the US, never mind leaving the country and seeing something outside of their borders. I think the same thing could be said for Londoners. Maybe we need to make it kind of a mandatory thing to go and visit other parts of the country if you didn't leave. I left for university much like you, Anissa, and it was a really different experience. It was like lots of eye-opening things that were good in some ways. I went to what's affectionately known as Shottingham, because there was a little bit of city where like people.
Oh my god! Sorry.
But that's what it was. It's a little people that were a little bit, just you're a bit more likely to get shot if you go to this part of the city. And I'm not saying that doesn't exist in London, but being in proximity to it was a very different experience. And seeing, the way that other people are living in less affluent areas in parts of town was really, really different. And it's just not that funny. Is that what they call it? That's what they call it.
Have you never heard that? Have you never heard it, Anissa?
I always have tears in my eyes. I think you don't understand.
So yeah, that was the thing. But I was very deliberate about that. I deliberately wanted to leave London because I thought I'm probably going to come back here and spend my whole life is down here. So let's leave for a little bit. But I know people that have never, not that they're very well travelled in terms of international travel, but they've never gone anywhere else in the United Kingdom. And I think that's maybe one of the few benefits to the pandemic. When things did open up briefly and we still couldn't really go anywhere, you suddenly saw holiday lets and things around the UK shoot up, and people actually exploring the country and seeing different parts of the country and seeing where the way that the other half live, and it can be very, very enlightening and eye-opening experience.
Sophie, following on from the second part of the question you asked in terms of like what it means to be English, that made me really think, because I really actually don't know what it means to be English. Like I spoke about earlier, and much like what Marisha said, like London is such in our own little bubble. So in my mind, I just saw myself as British versus English. And when I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure what it means to be English, because I feel like maybe it's just, I think honestly it's just in London, so it's the London experience, that we're not we don't have that same like patriotic view of England. Like we don't say we're English where the Scottish say they're Scottish and Irish say they're Irish and Welsh say they're Welsh. Like if we think about it, we don't actually have a national government that's just English. We don't have a national anthem that's just for England. Of course, we have a national day, but it's not even a bank holiday. People rarely even celebrate it. It's just one of those things that you see in the calendar, which is like, you know, England Day or whatever. And so I think England, which might be a strong comment to say, maybe we haven't done the best in building up our own kind of national identity and what it is to be English because we've been so driven on what it means to be British. Do you know what I mean?
That's such an interesting point because I've never thought about it in that sense because I've never seen myself as English, have never referred to myself as English, never would. And honestly, I'd be very devastated if Scotland left just because of the fact that I would have to call myself English because for me, English is synonymous with white. And if I'm being honest, because I was reading in The Guardian, they say much more people in the UK now see themselves as English, but they're saying ethnic minorities are the ones who probably least see themselves as English and would prefer to call themselves British. And I think there has been this kind of English heritage of, in my opinion, of like the English are the white, and you know, you can't be that. You can't be England. You can't be from this land. You're other. So in terms of that having been denied from, I would guess, people in the African diaspora, I've never really wanted it. And I would really find it difficult to start calling myself English. And oh yeah, I just don't want it. I really just don't want it.
I think some of that then may be the way in which it's been co-opted. So there are, I guess, factions of the English community that see it exactly as that being English is about being white or some kind of supremacist ideology. And you'll sometimes see, I think the only time it really ever feels, and this is just my observation, that the time we feel really comfortable with it is around the time of sport. So when everybody appears as, you know, England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and the Six Nations, or in the World Cup, or whatever it is, that feels like it's really the only time that you can kind of go out and wave an English flag, you know, the white one with the red cross on it. Outside of that, a lot of the time, as far as I understand it, when you kind of see people with those on a flagpole in their garden or take the cars, it's seen as this kind of racist nationalism. But it's the same flag. So that's what I'm saying. It's just that's where I think maybe the reluctance among non-white English people, because whichever way you want to look at it, like if you really want to distill it down, you know, I was born unless you weren't born in England, you know, you're English. That's where some of the hesitation and reluctance to kind of self-refer using that term might come from. But like everything that could be changed. So, and it doesn't necessarily. It doesn't. I don't think that's what it was meant to. You know, it was literally just meant to signify the land borders that make up England. It's what we've attached to it that has become a little bit murky.
I agree, and I think if Scotland, I got a question for you guys. If Scotland leaves and then Welsh's, you know, decides to, Ireland does, do you think like you would want to stay in England as we know it? Do you think that it wouldn't affect the way that you see, I guess, your country, your identity, and your life here? Would you still be like, I'm completely fine? Because I don't know if I would, to be honest. And I don't know why. Like, I think if it kind of broke up and went off into all different areas, I think, I'm not sure if this is where I want to be anymore.
I share your sentiment, Sophie. I'm not sure, because as you were saying it, I thought to myself, what ghetto hell would I be left in? Because I just thought, like, honestly, that was the only thing that flashed across my mind, because it was like, if all of those countries left, they contribute a lot to, especially as we keep saying in London, they contribute to a lot of things. And if they left, we'd be in a lot of trouble. And I selfishly do not want to bear those consequences. And not only just on our own, like, soil, us being a United Kingdom, it gives us a lot of power in other places in the country, in the world, and gives us a lot of reach. And I don't know if we'd have the same power or the same holding that we would if we were just England, even though I do feel like the other countries do see British people as just being English. So it's like, would there be much of a difference? But I do think there would be a slight difference, and I wouldn't even want to figure out what that difference is.
Yeah, I think I would just say quickly, it will definitely affect our standing in the world if Scotland leave and other countries.
100%. I don't think I would leave, but I think that comes back to the identification of myself as a Londoner. So I still feel like there's a degree of what I believe is so good about these unions, the diversity and the kind of trying to understand things and being this very sort of cultural melting pot, I feel would be preserved even in that thing. I think financially it's actually, yes, we would have some issues, but I think it's actually a far worse fate for the devolved nations to separate from us financially. I think when they look at the contribution of taxpayers and whether, because it's the economic centre of the country and of the union. So I think there might be some issues there. I don't know whether they would be able to, because they don't have themselves sort of set up as whole economies in the same way. Like when you think about the financial markets and how much money that, well, also responsible for the collapse of the economy at various points, but how much money is concentrated here. I agree that it just, because it is due to the decline in certain industries that may have been more popular. We went on a school trip when I was thinking about 14. We're on a school trip to Newcastle and they took us, it was the most random thing they've ever done. We were supposed to go to France or Germany and somehow ended up in Newcastle. I'm not really sure what happened. It's a bit different, but we went to Newcastle and we went on this coach tour of like a steel and iron works, and it was so alien to anything you would see, even the more industrialized industries. And if you look at the factories that are left over in London, maybe in the East End and stuff, it's so different to something like that. And when a whole industry like that breaks down or isn't supported, and you get the associated loss of job and therefore the loss of income and loss of livelihood, and generations that have all done this and pass it down and don't know what to do with themselves, that's where we have a problem. And I think what we haven't done is looked at how we reinvest in those areas or how we change what the kind of main output of those areas are so that they continue to be sort of self-sufficient and not profitable, but just like economically stable in their own right. And that's where the problem is, because then they're now really reliant on us kind of shooting money up and down the country, and it's a bit of a tricky thing to manage and get right on that scale.
Yeah, I think just as you're saying, Marisha, there's just a lot of work to do and more than we can talk about in this episode. And that means, unfortunately, that we've come to the end. We're going to have to leave you guys to have this conversation. So thank you for watching and listening to Ethnically Speaking. And where you can carry on the conversation is down below in the comments. So we want to know, do you think the United Kingdom should stay united? We want to hear all of your thoughts on that. But if you want even more of us, don't forget to sign up and subscribe to our email list to have access to Extra Ethnic, which is a special segment for our ride or die flans, but it's only exclusively available by the link in the description. So make sure that you sign up to our email list for that. If you want a summary of everything we've been talking about today, head on over to unitedmelaningroup.com/ES036. The link will be in the description. And if you've been watching us on YouTube, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single thing. We're going to be seeing you again on Friday, but until then, make sure you wear your mask, wash your hands, keep your distance, and stay safe.